So there is a deep significance in this whole series of events, the execution of Tatsunokuchi failing, and then the exile to Sado. Because Nichiren Daishonin knew at that time that through this happening, where he was shown to be at one with the universe, in that the perfect timing of this comet proved his oneness in that sense. Therefore, he felt in his heart it was time to begin to reveal his true identity. So previous to that, he'd made it clear that he was fulfilling the role of the Bodhisattva Jogyo, who in the story of the ceremony in the air, or the treasure tower, as it's known, in the Lotus Sutra, is the votary who will spread the teachings of the Lotus Sutra in the age of the latter day of the law, the age, in fact, which we're living in now, 2,000 and more years after Shakyamuni's death. And the time had come where he felt it necessary, because of what he desired to write in the Gosho, because of what he desired to teach to his followers and disciples, that he should reveal himself in his true identity, which was as the Buddha of this age, or as it's sometimes termed, the Buddha of Kuan Ganjo, of time without beginning or ending. The Buddha who is self-enlightened, untaught by anyone. He is self-enlightened and then reveals the true teachings, or the ultimate reality of life, the ultimate reality of life's meaning. So this was his great purpose, and it was time, in his view, to start revealing this to his closest disciples. But he did it very secretly and very, very cautiously, because if, as it was, he was being persecuted, even as the teacher or votary of the Lotus Sutra, but if he'd stood up publicly and said, I am the Buddha of Kuan Ganjo, the Buddha of time without beginning or ending, it would have meant that the whole country would have descended on him and persecuted him and his followers even more heavily. Therefore, he was careful the way he talked about it, right through all of the Gosho, and also in this Gosho too. But in one Gosho he said that on that day or night of Tatsunokuchi, he says the voter of the Lotus Sutra was beheaded, metaphorically. And his soul, he said, went to Sado Island. In other words, the real him went to Sado Island, the real reality of him as the original Buddha of Kuan Ganjo. So in the PS to this very Gosho, he says to Sarenbo, keep these matters to yourself. Nichiren is herein committed to writing the teachings of his own enlightenment, telling him not to spread the word yet. So Sarenbo was a priest who must have done something wrong so far as the government or the authorities at that time, or so far as his sect was concerned. He was a priest of the Tiendai sect, and for some reason he'd been exiled too. And Nichiren Daishonin, meeting him on this bleak island, shakabuku'd him. So whilst he was on Sado Island, such an important time for the future, because Nichiren Daishonin wrote some of the most important Gosho at that time, particularly two Goshos called The True Object of Worship and The Opening of the Eyes. These are not letters, they're theses, and The True Object of Worship explains in great detail the Gonzen from the viewpoint of the universal law, the law of life, and The Opening of the Eyes teaches about the Gonzen from the point of view of the person. So these are very important documents, very long and somewhat difficult to read, but as you may know, they're published in English in the major writings. So you can see from all this activity, these two great theses and many other Gosho that he'd written, that his spirit was incredible, despite the privations and hardships of his style of living there. Which is, of course, such a great example for us. If we're going through difficulties, we have only to think of Nichiren Daishonin and his amazing spirit, despite all these tremendous persecutions, which, of course, he underwent on our behalf. He was the first one. His mission was to appear in this world and be the first person to teach the existence of the law of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. And, of course, to ultimately inscribe the Gohonzon embodying his life and that law. So someone has to begin everything, and that was his task. So, of course, he took the full weight of the negative force of life on himself in doing that. Some of you in this hall were the first to start practicing in a town or in a city, and you know well what I mean. Because at the beginning, I know that it's like wading through glue to practice. Because Nam-myoho Renge-kyo has not yet saturated that particular piece of land. I can see some of you nodding your heads and smiling. And it's really hard. So from that you can even guess something of what Nichiren Daishonin faced against this colossally powerful negative force, which desired, of course, nothing else but to impede his progress. Because what he was doing was of such importance to the future of this world. So, like all Gosho, this particular one is divided into three sections. One is known as preparation, the other is known as revelation, and the third is known as transmission. It's not shown on your paper, but all Buddhas have taught in this sequence of preparation, revelation, and transmission. This is worth knowing. You'll find in every Buddhist teaching, before Nichiren Daishonin's time in the sutras and also in his Gosho, that he follows this always. So it is in fact the key, isn't it, to clear communication. First you prepare those who are going to read it or listen to it, so that they're, as it were, orientated in the right direction, facing the right way, sort of being prepared for what they're going to hear, bringing them up to date, setting the scene, if you like. And then after that, the revelation. What is the major point that is to be revealed in this teaching? And that is followed by transmission. How this revelation can be passed on to others in the future. So this is the most perfect way of communication. We often find ourselves confusing people because we don't prepare first the person who we want to listen. So they're saying, what? I don't see what you're getting at. Well, preparation is crucial. Then they can totally absorb what is coming. And of course transmission is vital if whatever is to be taught or declared is to be passed on to future generations. So we begin with preparation, and if you like to look at your copy of the Gosho there, John Gill is going to start reading. So first we'll read right through as an opening the first two paragraphs. Off you go, John.
Question. In the Hoben chapter of Volume 1 of the Lotus Sutra is the passage, "The true entity of all phenomena can only be understood and shared between Buddhas. This reality consists of the appearance, nature, and their consistency from beginning to end." What does this passage mean? Answer. It means that all beings and their environments in any of the 10 worlds, from hell at the lowest to Buddhahood at the highest, are without exception the manifestations of Myoho Renge Kyo. Where there is an environment, there is life within it. Myalo states, both life, shoho, and its environment, Eo, always manifest Myoho Renge Kyo. He also states, the true entity is invariably revealed in all phenomena, and all phenomena invariably possess the 10 factors. The 10 factors invariably function within the 10 worlds, and the 10 worlds invariably entail both life and its environment. And both the life and environment of hell exist within the life of Buddha. On the other hand, the life and environment of Buddha do not transcend the lives of common mortals. Such precise explanations leave no room for doubt. Thus, all life in the universe is clearly Myoho Renge Kyo. Even the 2 Buddhas, Shakyamuni and Taoho, are the functions of Myoho Renge Kyo, who appeared to bestow its blessing upon mankind. They manifested themselves as the 2 Buddhas and, seated together in the treasure tower, nodded in mutual agreement.
Well, that's really difficult to understand from the start, isn't it? What Nichiren Daishonin is doing here, in fact, when you read it carefully, as you may be able to do later, is he's explaining what in fact makes life tick, what life really is, or perhaps, as I often call it, the mechanics of life. He is here expounding. So you will notice that he mentions here various very important Buddhist principles. The first one is Ichinen Sanzen, that is to say 3,000 realms or states in a moment of existence. Ichinen Sanzen. And he also mentions the principle of Eshofuni, the inseparability of oneself and one's environment, the absolute interdependence between the two. And thirdly, he talks about a principle called Kyochi Myogo. So I'm not sure how many of you understand Ichinen Sanzen, but it's not so difficult if you really get down to it. So Ichinen Sanzen is that we have 10 life states, which you all know as the 10 worlds. And within each of those 10 life states exist all the other worlds. 10 by 10 is 100, right? What does it mean, that principle of the mutual possession of the 10 worlds within each world? What it means is that within us, though we may have, for example, hell, hunger, anger, and so on, there is also Buddhahood. And even in Buddhahood, there is hell. So the meaning behind this, the most important meaning behind it, is that the Buddha is in fact a human being. Not some supreme being, super being, or God. He is a human being with all the 9 other worlds, from hell to Bodhisattva, in his life. That's the important part of the mutual possession, as it's called, of the 10 worlds within each world. And then that 100 realms or life states, 10 by 10, 10 worlds by 10 worlds again within each other. You have the 10 factors, which you recite over and over again every day. Nyoze so, nyoze sho, nyoze tai, nyoze riki, and so on. The 10 factors. So the 10 factors is expressing how those worlds, those different life states, are projected outwards from you or me. And also within ourselves, of course. So the 10 factors are, first of all, the physical side of our life. Secondly, the spiritual side of our life. Thirdly, the very heart of our life, the nucleus or core of our life. So each one of those is affected by whatever main life state we're in. If we're in a state of anger, then our physical appearance will be angry. our spiritual being will be angry, and the very core or heart of our life even will be angry. And this comes out from us through the remaining 7 factors. Firstly, power. The power of one's life, or energy. And then that power has influence. And then through that influence, you create an inherent cause, which turns into an actual cause, an external cause, if you like, which in turn creates an effect which is deep in one's life and ultimately appears as an effect on the surface of your life. And this is all happening with absolute consistency from beginning to end. So you say, Noze so, Noze sho, Noze tai, Noze riki. This is what I'm talking about, those 10 factors. And you end with Honmaku Kyoto. Honmaku Kyoto, with absolute consistency from beginning to end. In other words, the whole of your life is expressing whatever life state you're in at any given moment. So that's a bit alarming if you're in the state of anger or greed, and pretty tragic if you're in the state of hell. But if you're in the state of Buddhahood, how incredible that is. Of course we can't see it. We find it hard to believe. But in fact, when you chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo in the state of Buddhahood, the Gosho teaches us, we are expressing that Buddhahood in an unseen way, in all those different ways. And this, of course, out into our environment. And this is why we get benefit, both inconspicuous as well as conspicuous. And then finally, where have we got to? 10 by 100, right? That's 1,000. And then finally, as I've said, you express this state of life in 3 different realms. The first is yourself, your inner life. The second is in society that surrounds you. And the third is the land on which you live your life. Those are the 3,000 realms in a moment of existence. In a moment you can change from anger to rapture, for example. In that moment you can express totally, with such power, these different life states. And of course, it's through the proof of practice, the benefits that we gain from it, that we begin to realize, or have some realization anyway, of the extraordinary power of each one of our lives. And the power behind it all, of course, is, in terms of that 10th world of Buddhahood, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is at the heart of these 3,000 states of life in any moment, if you wish it to be so. And this is the importance of regular practice, of Gongyo and Daimoku. Gongyo, the preparation to chant the cleanest, most perfect, most pure, most strong, most wonderful Daimoku. That is why Nichiren Daishonin, at the end of this very Gosho, explains the practice in those terms. So even that brief little understanding has to be enough for today. But I hope you will be able to ponder on it and think about it, because it's such an incredible theory, which we then prove more and more is actually working in our own lives. So Kyochi Myogo, which I mentioned, is not actually stated there, of course, but that is represented by the 2 Buddhas seated together in the treasure tower. Well, the Gohonzon is like a diagram of the treasure tower of one's own life. Nichiren Daishonin wrote to one of his disciples called a Bodhisattva and said, because a Bodhisattva was saying, are you really saying that my life is like the Gohonzon? And Nichiren Daishonin wrote back saying, a Bodhisattva is the treasure tower, and the treasure tower is a Bodhisattva. You and me and everyone has that life within them. Of course, it's the life in the state of Buddhahood. In other words, we are the Gohonzon. What Nichiren Daishonin inscribed was to help us to understand that. So even if we have no Gohonzon in these present times, still you will gain benefit. Though, of course, it's great to have the Gohonzon, and it's a great aid to one. But if you can't have the Gohonzon for the time being, then because Nam-myoho Renge Kyo is a natural law, it compensates. If Gohonzons were available and you said, oh, I don't think I want one of those, then that wouldn't be a very good cause to me. If the Gohonzon is there and being offered to you. But if the Gohonzon, through no fault of yours, isn't there, then, of course, the natural law of life compensates. So when Mr. Toda was in prison, the second president of the Soka Gakkai, he had his greatest experience or realization. But there was no Gohonzon in his prison cell. And of course we have plenty of examples. People who practice Naitoku who gain benefit. And the Gohonzon is there to help us understand our Buddhahood. Because in fact it's like a picture of it. That is the point of the Gohonzon. It is a reflection of ourselves. It is not power outside of us. It is there, inscribed by Nichiren Daishonin, as a mirror of our inner selves when we chant Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. Nichiren Daishonin said, when you chant Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, immediately you are in the state of enlightenment. You are in Buddhahood. You can't chant Nam-myoho Renge Kyo with sincerity without being in the state of Buddhahood. Though, of course, we find it difficult to believe ourselves. Why do we find it difficult to believe? Because all the other 9 worlds are within us too. And we're very sensitive to those. So gradually, of course, it's through experience of the Buddha state at work within us that brings us to understand that, yes, even in me, it's there. Such an amazing thing. So Kyochi Myogo is the 2 Buddhas who are on the Gohonzon, Shakyamuni Buddha and Taho Buddha, sitting, as it were, in the treasure tower. And they nod to each other in the tale as it's told in the Lotus Sutra. And then a banner with Myoho Renge Kyo goes up behind them. The nodding and the Myoho Renge Kyo is expressing the fact that the wisdom of the Gohonzon working in our lives, represented by Shakyamuni Buddha, will quite naturally bring benefit and good fortune from our external environment. Kyo-chi. Kyo is the objective view. Chi is the subjective view, oneself and the Gohonzon. Myogo, fusion. When you chant Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, the wisdom of your Buddha state, represented by Shakyamuni Buddha, relates totally with the Buddhahood in your environment and brings benefit of one form or another. So beautiful, isn't it? So that is your life. Incredible thought. But of course, unfortunately, we have a thing called karma, which puts great big clouds in the way and we can't appreciate it. But that is Kyochi Myogo, and that is the meaning of the mention of the two Buddhas here, Shakyamuni and Tahoe. So I hope from that you understand that this paragraph is really about the mechanics of life, how life works, how everything in your life state is reflected immediately into your environment and then immediately reflected back. So let's push on now and read the next paragraph.
No one but Nichiren has ever revealed these teachings. Tiantai, Mialo, and Dengyo knew in their hearts, but did not declare them aloud. There was reason for their silence. The Buddha had not entrusted them with this mission. The time had not yet come, and they had not been the Buddha's disciples from ages past. No one but Jogyo, Muhengo, and the other leaders of the Bodhisattvas of the earth can appear during the first 500 years of the latter day of the law to spread the law of Myoho Renge Kyo. Only they are qualified to inscribe the object of worship, which physically manifests the ceremony of the two Buddhas seated together in the treasure tower. This is because both the law and the object of worship are the reality of Ichinen Sanzen, revealed in the Juryo chapter of the essential teaching.
So then I want to ask John to just read two paragraphs, rather one sentence and another a longer sentence. If you would, John, right at the beginning of this next paragraph.
The two Buddhas, Shakyamuni and Tahoe, are merely functions of the true Buddha, while Myoho Renge Kyo actually is the true Buddha.
So Myoho Renge Kyo actually is the true Buddha, at the heart of life. And then the last few lines of the next paragraph after that, beginning, "Here the true Buddha."
Here the true Buddha is the common mortal, whereas provisional Buddhas means the Buddha. Nevertheless, there is a clear distinction between a Buddha and a common mortal, in that a common mortal is deluded, while a Buddha is enlightened. The common mortal fails to realize that he himself possesses both the entity and the function of the Buddha's three properties.
What an astonishing statement. Of course, it's not so astonishing to us now because we've already been taught it. But what a revolutionary statement in the Middle Ages in Japan. That the common people were Buddhas or potential Buddhas. How could anyone have believed it? The ruling authorities didn't want everyone to be Buddhas. How difficult they would be to control. This is why this colossal persecution descended on Nichiren Daishonin. Astonishing, revolutionary teaching. It's even revolutionary to this day. There are many other sects of Buddhism. They can't believe this to this day. But this is what Nichiren Daishonin taught. The true Buddha is the common mortal, whereas provisional Buddhas means the Buddha, meaning Shakyamuni Buddha, who prepared the way for this great revelation to be made by Nichiren Daishonin. If it hadn't been for Shakyamuni appearing and teaching the Lotus Sutra, things would have been much more difficult for Nichiren Daishonin. So in the natural state of events, he prepared the way. And Nichiren Daishonin was able to relate his Buddhism to the Buddhism that Shakyamuni had taught 2,000 years previously. This was very important in justifying and debating the truth of his doctrines. So Shakyamuni's mission was very important in relation to the ultimate mission of Nichiren Daishonin. So everyone has Buddhahood within them. They just have to work on it to reveal it. What a wonderful thing. And this is the meaning of Kosen Rufu. That more and more people can reveal their Buddhahood. This is such an amazing aim or target, isn't it? 20 years ago, we could never have had this gathering, for instance, in this hall. The Bodhisattvas of the earth are appearing. more and more. So moving, isn't it? At least it's moving for me. Thinking back to sort of 1974 when I came back to this country, and there were just about 100 courageous pioneers. Wonderful thing. The way the Buddha's predictions are coming true. So now we'll read on. On you go.
All phenomena in the sutra refers to the 10 worlds, and the true entity is what permeates the 10 worlds. Reality is another expression for Myoho Renge Kyo. Hence, Myoho Renge Kyo is manifest in all phenomena. Hell appears hellish. That is the reality of hell. When hunger emerges, the reality of hell is no longer present. A Buddha exhibits the reality of a Buddha, and a common mortal that of a common mortal. All phenomena are themselves manifestations of Myoho Renge Kyo. This is the meaning of all phenomena reveal the true entity. Tiantai states, the profound principle of true entity is the original law of Myoho Renge Kyo, thus identifying the phrase true entity with the theoretical teaching and the original law of Myoho Renge Kyo with the essential teaching. You should ponder this passage deep in your heart.
So why does Nichiren Daishonin say we should ponder this passage deep in our hearts? It's because this is the nub of things, if you like. The fact that the true entity of our lives, no matter how much we may be going through difficulties, no matter how rotten we feel we are, no matter how much we may regret things we've done in the past, nothing stands in the way of the fact that Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, or Myoho Renge Kyo as it's described here, is deep within the lives of every single one of us. So you can follow from that guilt is ridiculous. Perhaps this was the greatest joy that I discovered when I was learning about this practice. Guilt is purposeless. Once you begin to understand this, what is the use of guilt? Ridiculous. What matters is that we work at things and discover the true entity of our lives through the actual proof which Nichiren Daishonin promised we would definitely have. Then guilt goes out of the window. So many people in the Western world suffered so dreadfully from guilt, deep in their lives. They may not acknowledge it openly, but it's going on there like an insipid, horrible poison. This is an awful thing. What matters is today and tomorrow and the next day. What messes we made of things in the past have happened. What on earth can we do about them? They're gone. There may be the effects from them still, but they're gone. We shape the future. This is what Nichiren Daishonin's Buddhism is about. In the third prayer of Gongyo, we thank and praise the Buddha of Honinmyo. Honinmyo meaning the now, not the past. Oh, I failed that exam, so I'll never be able to be a so-and-so doctor or teacher, whatever it was. Ridiculous. Go for it again. That's what Nichiren Daishonin is saying. But this time, go for it, chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. Everything is a new beginning. Whatever is past is past. We can't change it. This is such a wonderful thing. Okay, so now, rather than reading through in detail, we have to, because of time, move to just passages. And the first one is 2 paragraphs on. After that it says, Nichiren alone began.
Nichiren alone began to carry out the task of the Bodhisattvas of the earth. He may even be one of them. If Nichiren should be a Bodhisattva of the earth, then so must his disciples. The Hoshi chapter states, if there is someone, whether man or woman, who secretly teaches to one person even a single phrase of the Lotus Sutra, let it be known that he is the envoy of the Buddha, sent to carry out the Buddha's work. Who else but us can this possibly refer to?
Speaking to you and I. Who else but us? Every member of Soka Gakkai International who chants Nam-myoho Renge Kyo and sincerely tries to practice, and who spreads the teachings of Nichiren Daishonin, is embraced by this paragraph. Every member of the Soka Gakkai International throughout the world is a bodhisattva of the earth. The prediction which is contained in the Lotus Sutra, taught by Shakyamuni so long ago, more than 3,000 years or so ago, again in this analogy of the treasure tower. The Buddha asks, Shakyamuni Buddha asks, sitting next to Tahoe, you remember, in the treasure tower. And he looks out, and his disciples are all gathered round. And he said, who is going to teach this great law in the age of the latter day of the law? And everyone puts up their hands and says, I am. And he said, no, chum, sorry. That's not your mission. These are the people who will teach it in the latter day of the law. And at that moment, tens of thousands of human beings, ordinary human beings, appeared out of the earth. As many, the Lotus Sutra says, as the sands of 10,000 Ganges rivers. Of course, that's not a mathematical calculation. It just means an awful lot of people. And Shakyamuni said, these are the people who will spread the great pure law in the age of Mappo. You all. And me. Incredible. So the whole of SGI are bodhisattvas of the earth. The first to appear in this world. Round about 20 million at the moment. So even High Priest Nikken, in his New Year message, this very year, when behind the scenes he was plotting to destroy the Soka Gakkai, in his New Year message, he called the Soka Gakkai a mystic organization. The whole problem that we face at this moment, in this very important time, was precipitated by the appearance of the Soka Gakkai, the appearance of bodhisattvas of the earth, ordinary human beings, pure in their approach to faith, sincerely wishing to practice as best they can, desiring to spread the teaching to their friends and their parents and so on. With pure leaders, Mr. Makiguchi, so courageous and so very pure in his faith, strict in the way he taught. Mr. Toda, also passionately determined, pure in faith. So what was shown up, of course, was the comparison between these pure, dedicated people and the priesthood. The priesthood who had existed for 700 years or so, and who had been corrupted by the whole influence of history in Japan. So I just learnt the other day that the characters in Japanese for temple mean something like official office or government office, literally, in their literal sense. It's extraordinary, isn't it? So, in other words, the temple became, under the shoguns, the office of the local agent of the government, of the ruling authorities. And who was that agent? No one else but the Buddhist priest. The Buddhist priest had secular power, therefore, over the people. So he not only conducted the ceremonies, funerals, weddings, and all the rest of it. But he also was the agent of the government, and as such, if anyone wanted to travel out of that village, they had to get a passport. Who signed the passport and gave it? The priest. Also, the priest, as the government agent, was always required to report to the shogun any trouble accruing, any bad behavior. So his rule was very supreme. And, of course, the government looked the other way when gradually this power got the better of them, and they began to extort money for everything that they did in terms of prayers or funerals or anything else for the local people. Of course, not every priest was like that. There were good priests, but there were an awful lot of corrupt ones. And this is deliberate. The shogun, Tokugawa Ieyasu, the first shogun, was a very, very clever man. He ruled Japan with a rod of iron in all sorts of subtle and clever ways, and this was one of them, because he ruled religion as well through it.